Hello, this is Ronjini Joshua, and today we're going to be talking about managing the media in 2024. A lot of the webinars I plan are typically because there's some kind of need, a question, or a thought that I come up with because of things that are happening in the media or in PR at the moment. So, this is a pretty informal discussion about managing the media in 2024, and hopefully you can get some really great tips on how to kind of move forward with your public relations or communications plan, getting into the media. We're going to talk a little bit about the media landscape, some best practices, something where you can kind of walk away and be able to leverage some of this knowledge to get your own media attention. If you have questions, no question is a dumb question. I won't answer those questions. No, no, just please put them in the Q&A so that I can answer those, because this will be kind of a fluid conversation. And so I will get to those questions as soon as possible, as soon as I get through my initial kind of background on managing the media in 2024. But I want to make sure that I'm answering any questions you might have about pitching, media relations, press releases, public relations in general. This is really aimed at getting into the media more effectively and being able to position yourself and brand yourself more effectively within that media landscape, and how to become a thought leader, how to get speaking opportunities, how to gain commentary opportunities in broadcast media. So we'll cover all of that. The first thing I wanted to start with, which I always am really bad at doing, but my executive assistant reminded me today, is just giving you guys some details on all the really cool stuff that we have going on. We're actually going to be coming out with a scorecard, a PR readiness scorecard for startups. It's actually ready. So I will follow up with this video with the scorecard readiness test so you guys can see that. If you're not already a listener, we have the PR Playbook podcast. I believe it's like 160 episodes of DIY PR advice, interviews with marketing, SEO, social media experts from all over the industry. Even with startups, we talk about everything in PR. So check out the PR Playbook podcast. It's on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, everything. Also, we're going to be launching a DIY PR course shortly here. So stay tuned for that. And if you're not already a subscriber to the DIY PR letter on LinkedIn, that is where I will be resharing all of this information so that you can follow and get everything that you might need. And then last but not least, my email, Ronjini at thesilvertelegram.com. It's RONJINI at thesilvertelegram.com. You can DM me on LinkedIn, email me any questions you might have. So I'm accessible and happy to strategize, send you a 30-minute free strategy session for attending this conference, just so that we can, help iron out any questions you have. Because after 20 years of doing tech PR, the worst thing that could be not having clarity on what PR is and how you can achieve it. And so, one of my main goals is educating our potential customers or just our audiences, startups in general, founders, entrepreneurs, marketing pros on how to best leverage PR and what it means to have good PR and things like that. So that's kind of my viewpoint. So if you guys have any questions, please reach out either via email in the Q&A here or on LinkedIn. So just getting started, the current media landscape. So the media landscape is very volatile right now. A lot of reasons that you're seeing the types of content is because it's sponsored, which means paid media. So there's a category of paid media and earned media. And I just explained this to someone about 30 minutes ago. But basically, most journalistic media editorial opportunities are earned. That's why they're so hard to get into. And even though it seems like it could be easy, it is very difficult to get the attention of earned media. The biggest challenge there right now is that there is a lot of distrust in the media based on the political climate, and just based on years and years of, shady practices. There's some journalists that have more credibility than others. So it's just very important and critical the types of media that you work with. And nowadays, also, when you're talking about consumer tech and product reviews, there's a lot of paid sponsored posts that go on in the background. There's a lot of affiliate links because the media has had to change the way that they earn money. And because of that, there's less trust in the media. That being said, I've spoken to a lot of journalists over the last 6 months who talk about brands becoming their own media and educating their publics. And that's doing it from a non-promotional standpoint. That is really the best way to educate. It's kind of like what I just said of how I want to educate you guys on PR and best practices is putting out quality, credible information without the expectation of getting paid for it, right? And so that builds credibility, value, and trust with your brand, just as much as it does with a service provider like myself. Like you really want to be able to disseminate that information, educate people about the challenges and benefits of your industry and your products and your services. And so that's something to keep in mind when you're working with the media and you're working with media that are high profile. Let's say you want to get into Wall Street Journal, TechCrunch, VentureBeat, things like that. You want to make sure that you're adding value because now AI is playing a role into it, right? There is the whole concept of artificial intelligence doing a lot of the background research and writing and stuff like that. However, we all know if you've been in tech for a while that AI needs human oversight, human input, and everybody knows it's AI. Or if they don't yet, they will know what's AI generated and what's not. We've all got robo phone calls, right? Robo spam. After about 10 seconds that it's a robot, and then you hang up. So it's that same thing for quality content on the internet. At about 5 seconds, 10 seconds after you start reading, it's AI generated. So AI is really great for background research and collecting information, but not good when it comes to putting value to your voice, gaining credibility, and publishing quality content. I was in a webinar about 3 weeks ago and with a lot of journalists who were talking about how they don't use AI, that they hesitate to use AI because of one, tracking purposes. People are tracking. They want to be known for quality content. And also that they just don't trust that the AI is going to pull up the right information because there's not enough input yet. However, we are obviously getting more and more sophisticated every day that we add into this, chat GPT and this AI machine. It's getting more and more sophisticated. So just something to think about. The media are looking for eyeballs. So that's something else to think about. Something that our clients often forget is that the media is not waiting for us to come to them with a pitch. What they're doing is waiting to have a story that's going to generate clicks, right? So that's what we have to focus on when we're working with the media. How do we help them get more viewers? How do we get them more attention so that we can get more attention? So help them help you, basically. And so that's kind of the media landscape that we're working with. There's a lot of freelancers. So that's something also to be aware of. A lot of people are not on staff anymore. They're contributing to multiple publications. So know what they're writing, do your research, understand where their area and key of focus is. And then the other thing to know is that while there's not a lot of staff, there is a lot of need for content. So contributed articles, thought leadership, there's a lot of opportunities for that as well. And then what I've heard also is that freelancers have a little bit more time to generate stories than on staff journalists and reporters. So on staff journalists and reporters, they have an editorial manager. That manager assigns out stories, and typically they want stories fast. It's a fast pipeline. So you have to give them as much information as possible on a quick timeline. However, freelancers have a little bit more freedom to build their stories, collect information on their own, go back and forth with people. So that's just something to be aware of. Last but not least about the media landscape is that reporters, freelancers, journalists are easier to find more than ever. So basically, when I started PR, I used to have to use a resource called Bacon's, which is a manual almost. It's like a thick manual about this big. And you have to look through it and you can get their email address and their phone number. You look it up. It's almost like a telephone book. Then that, evolved to being online. Then that evolved to being Cision, which is basically like the PR tool for most PR people, like the master PR tool. There's a lot of other ones as well, but that Cision is kind of a very well-known PR tool where you can look up information. Now, a lot of the media information is published on the website, a masthead, Twitter, on their link trees. So you can get media information. You can contact them on LinkedIn. I've heard two things about Twitter: that a lot of journalists hate DMs, and then some journalists welcome DMs, but the ones who welcome them usually say that in their profile. So just be wary of that. Like, how you contact people is a very touchy thing. I'm sure I've pissed people off. Um, I know I have, and any PR person, if you haven't pissed someone off, you're not doing your job. So that comes with the territory and having a thick skin. So that media landscape is really volatile. That's why it's so hard for people to work with the media, and that's why when you do it yourself, you have to kind of batten down and dig your heels in a little bit. And so it takes a little bit of time and resources, but it's worth it if you do quality over quantity. You do your research, you really kind of prime yourself. I almost guarantee that you'll get a response if you do the work. So, I want to dive into pitching the media a little bit. And let me check if you guys have any questions yet. Okay, so no questions yet. Hopefully I'm just answering them as I go along because I'm so good at this already. So pitching the media, landing a pitch is really, really important, really difficult. One of the things I tell people is if you're sending an email to someone, let's say you've gotten your pitch angle. We'll talk about this a little bit more in depth, but you've got your pitch angle, you've got their email address, you're ready to send them an email. If you wouldn't open it, they won't probably open it. So send it to yourself first. It's very easy to do, very quick. Send yourself an email and see if you would open it. One of the big mistakes that people make when pitching is that they put their own brand name that nobody knows yet in the headline, the subject line of the email. That's not going to work because they don't know you. So if they don't know you, you need to put something recognizable in that email subject line, right? It's almost like A/B testing for email marketing, on the marketing side, email newsletters and things like that. Really make sure that the subject line, that's almost like the most important thing. The subject line highlights why that person is going to open that email. So if we're talking about an AI reporter, I'm being very generic. Let's say it's a reporter that's covering AI, and you have a new innovation that's more advanced than ChatGPT, more advanced than any other AI that anyone's ever seen before. You have to convey that without using your brand name because your brand name hasn't made a name for itself yet. So something you've never seen before in AI. You can even add their name. Let's say their name is John Smith. Hey, John, this is something you've never seen before in AI. And we've actually played with this before. We worked with a commercial drone company, and the subject line was something you've never seen a drone do before. And so we actually got some amazing coverage from like Vice and Motherboard and VentureBeat and TechCrunch during that launch. It was actually a seed round funding announcement. And then we had a video that went with it. And it was just really, that subject line really hit the mark because nobody knew the name of that company. So we didn't use it. Why use it? But we did have something different that no one had ever seen before. It was a precision drone and did some really cool stuff. And so the video actually showed how that precision drone worked and spelled out hello world. It was really cool. And so we garnered a lot of coverage and attention for that particular pitch. So when you're pitching, make sure that you have that subject line that's really going to call attention. Second thing that the reporters complain about the most, I cannot say this enough, and I do say it all the time, is that you're pitching either the wrong person or a reporter that covers a completely different beat. Do your research. Make sure that you're doing your research. It's very, very important in managing your media. And so making sure that you do quality over quantity will help you do your research, a little bit more research. I like to pick 5 to 10 journalists. If you're DIYing this PR activity, I like to pick 5 to 10 journalists to reach out to over the month. Let's say for an entrepreneur or a startup founder, and really focus down on those 5 people and write a personalized email. Keep it short and sweet. The first one should be a short introduction, a reason for them to respond, right? The second email should be some more information and a reason for them to connect with you, whether it's LinkedIn or whether it's by phone, 15-minute phone call, a coffee, whatever the case may be. The third email is more of the call to action of like, let's write an article, let's do a review, let's meet up at this event. So remember this kind of process of building a relationship. The quick hits are great, but it's really not realistic and it's not sustainable. And what you want to do is create some sustainable relationships so that you can get that big piece in TechCrunch or Wired or Wall Street Journal. It does take time. PR is a marathon and not a sprint, even though you can sometimes sprint to win. So there is that opportunity to sprint to win, especially when you're launching, announcing a Series A, launching a new product during the holidays. There's all these really cool windows of being able to get a lot of media coverage. CES is another one. But for the most part, if you want to create a plan with longevity, if you're trying to create brand awareness and visibility among your investors, among your key stakeholders, then you want to really plan for 3 to 6 months and then 6 to 12 months. And then I would say I've been doing PR for 20 years. A plan that's older or more stale than 12 months is a stale plan. So you want to make sure that you're updating or revisiting your plans and your pitches. The news cycles are so short and there's so much stuff going on in the world that you really need to revisit and rethink your strategies probably every 6 months. So every 2 quarters or so. And I think every day is a new opportunity to reach the media in a new way. So don't ever feel like you are left behind or late. And it could be that you're late. A lot of times, one of the big challenges that we see as a PR agency is people approach us for PR when they need it next week or this week. Plan a buffer into your PR program. There is time, no matter what you think you can do, at what speed you can do it in, time is the same for everyone. And you need at least a nice buffer of a month before you start an active PR plan. You could probably get that down to 2 weeks if you have someone, if you're paying someone more and you have a bigger budget and you have like the sole attention of that PR professional. You have a PR professional on your team, or you have a small team or a boutique agency like ours. But you're going to have to pay for that because time is something that you can't substitute when building relationships with reporters. And it also depends on the time of year. In the summertime, things take a little bit longer because people are in and out of the office. But to be completely honest, since COVID happened, people are in and out of the office all the time, year round almost. The only place that it really poses a real problem is in Europe, where people take like actual month-long vacations. And so sometimes we have some delays in Europe during the summertime because of that. But otherwise, people are taking vacations whenever they want now. So that's not as much of an issue. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind. These are lots of little tips to keep in mind while pitching the media. I hope you guys have your pencils. But yes, absolutely. I think the landscape is fast paced. And to keep up with it, you guys have to really incorporate, I think I mentioned in a previous LinkedIn post, a quality amount of time to allocate for PR is 3 to 4 hours a week, if you can. And if you can't do it, a member of your team should allocate 3 to 4 hours of thinking with a PR hat on and really carving out what you want to do. Another area that you guys should really think about when doing media is thought leadership. It doesn't seem as exciting, because thought leadership has to be technology and service agnostic, which means you're coming from an educational standpoint. It's building leadership over time, over a series of articles. But it's easy to do relatively. You have control over the messaging and you can really craft out a niche for yourself. And so many media outlets, especially trade publications, you can dominate your trade publications with thought leadership and contributed content. We have a lot of different blogs and podcasts around contributed content. So I would encourage you to go to the DIY PR letter, PR playbook podcast, and the Silver Telegram blog to take a look at some of the contributed content, best practices, things like that on how to build those pieces, because that is a area that I feel is underutilized for every brand. Also, you want to make sure that when you are creating that content, you have a really good grasp of keywords for your brand. And that's something that I think people assume that SEO and keyword searches are kind of, I don't know if they think it's a thing of the past, but if you are missing that in your PR content, you are missing the mark. Make sure that you're incorporating keywords into every piece of content, leveraging some kind of SEO tool to really analyze your content, because the biggest thing that you can miss is multi-purposing your PR content, which basically means leveraging it for social, leveraging it for your blog or your website, leveraging it for email marketing, leveraging it for submitting to different media outlets. One thing I want you to keep in mind is if you are submitting content to media outlets, do that first. Send it to the media outlet first, right? Google indexes your content based on where it's seen first. So if you want it to be associated with your website, driving traffic to the website, post it on your blog first. But when you're looking at media contributions, they usually want an exclusive, which basically means that it's original content not posted anywhere else before you post it there. So after it's been posted, you can do whatever you want, repost, link back, and that's okay. But usually they want original content that hasn't been posted somewhere else. So just keep that in mind. That doesn't mean you can't reuse some of the content and repurpose it and reformat it. We do that all the time with the same kind of theme, but a different look and feel. So there's lots of ways to manipulate content to be able to maximize its potential and really use it in lots of different ways. Finding the right story. That's the next area that I really wanted to talk about. Oh, I got a question. So one of the questions is, what SEO tools would you recommend to utilize to analyze content? Well, if you're using WordPress, they have an SEO, they already have like an SEO built-in SEO plugins. So I can send you guys a list afterwards, but SEMrush is really the go-to. There are, hold on, let me think of some other ones. SEMrush is the one I use a lot. I use some SEO audit report. I use, what else do we use? Ahrefs to kind of analyze keywords. Those are the ones I use the most. But if you're using WordPress or Squarespace or website, um, whatever website platform that you're using to do website development, usually has some kind of plugin that you can use. So it doesn't, there's nothing that's better than another. They're all pretty similar. So I would tap into one of those. SEMrush is the one that we use the most. But yes. I hope that answers the question. All right. So the next thing that I'll get into is finding the right story. So basically, what stories are you going to be championing? And that actually falls into that SEO question as well, is where do you want to rank, right? Like what kind of SEO, or what do you want to pop up when your name comes up? And so one of the things, I'm just going to use ourselves as an example. We are startup PR experts. So we do a lot of content that includes the word startup in it, and PR, obviously, married together. How to hire the right startup PR agency, how to do startup PR, why is startup PR different than regular PR? So we actually write a lot of content around those particular topics because we are trying to rank for startup PR specifically. And we've been doing startup PR. Well, I have been doing startup PR for 20 years. The agency's been around for 12. So we do have a lot of longevity and breadth in that, but we have to kind of create that consistent messaging, repetitiveness in all of our content. It does feel a little dry after a while, but there's ways that you can kind of spice it up by using a thesaurus. So finding the right story is really, really important. What we do in the startup space for finding the right story is basically looking at the biggest challenges and needs of the startup community. I participate in webinars, and just kind of listen to some of the challenges that startups talk about. Obviously, investor relations is one of them, especially right now in today's media environment and like just political climate. They're talking about where investors are investing the most in startups. And so we address topics like that, like how do you improve your investor relations with PR? That's like the perfect example that I can give for us. And that is a viable story for us because we do deal with investor relations. Brand visibility is important for a lot of investors as well. So we kind of tap on that. We have a resource coming out about how to manage investor expectations with PR, and what PR does for investor relations. So I'm again using our agency and PR as a topic, but this you could do the same thing in your industry. What are the challenges that you're solving? What are your investors looking for? Why did they invest in the first place? And then be answering those questions with the content you create. So that's kind of how you find the right story. If you're having a problem landing that story with the media, that's a different challenge, right? What is the media covering? So you have to merge what your key stakeholders are looking for with what the media is already tapped into as far as topics that are important. However, typically, one of the hacks I like to do is I talk to the sales team of our clients and ask them, hey, what has created the most sales over the last month? What has generated the most leads, or sales calls in the last month? And usually those topics are excellent for both the media and your key stakeholders and for content development for your website and social media, and will resonate the most. So sales teams actually have a great insight on what PR is going to work. And I feel like there's such a disconnect between sales and PR and marketing and social media. I've been championing integrated communications for the last 3 or 4 years, really trying to align those different teams. I try to get on sales calls as much as possible to kind of hear what's going on there, because that is the best way to get the right story. Another way to get a right story is the human perspective, the human angle, which some people don't want to tap into because they don't feel comfortable. And that's okay. But there is that human perspective, the human element that a lot of people are using in media these days that may help. Some of it has to do with hobbies. We got press for one of our CEOs based on the fact that he was a cyclist, but he's does a consumer product. So it was one of the stories was in I think Cycle World, or I forget the exact cycle trade publications, but it was about managing their, like, balancing their life with cycling and starting a CPG company, and how you can do both, and what does that mean? What does balance mean for an executive, and that kind of stuff. So there are human interest pieces that can help get some more visibility of your executives. There's human interest pieces in how companies were developed. There is a company called Midday Squares. They're doing, they post a lot on LinkedIn. I follow them. They're a Canadian company. They've been sharing their journey every step of the way on LinkedIn, the personal journey, a business journey, how they got into Costco, mental health. They've been covering all these different areas, and each of the founders are kind of championing a different zone, and they've gotten a lot of attention that way. And so I think they've been doing a really good job from a B2B standpoint in sharing their story. And now they're in a position where that CPG angle is going to really fly even further because they've shared so much about their personal story. So finding the right story can come in a lot of different ways. And this is what takes the most time for PR people is trial and error. So if you feel like your PR person has been pitching for a long time and they haven't gotten traction, what is a long time? First of all, a long time could be, to me, it's about 2 weeks. But it could be 1 week to somebody and it could be a month. I think thematic pitching for a month is worth its salt. So pitching a topic for about a month and finding out where it lands, but also making changes along the way. Picking for a month, I think, is a good cadence. But if something isn't landing within 2 weeks, you hear crickets, you don't hear anything back, change the perspective a little bit, change the lens, add a little bit more value. Data is always like a champion of PR. Every journalist loves data. If you have data in any degree, find out how you can leverage the data that you own, because that is going to get you a story. I guarantee it. Let me think. What other things can I say before we dive into best practices? Okay. I don't know. If you have any questions, let me know. But best practices. So I want to kind of cover some PR best practices on pitching. Number one, research, not just the journalist that you're pitching, but the outlet. The way I typically create my outlet list is knowing where my key stakeholders are reading their news. I used to have a client that always wanted to get into Business Insider. For whatever reason, it was on his bucket list. However, his audience wasn't reading Business Insider. He was reading Business Insider, but his audience wasn't there. So we got into Business Insider. It did not reap benefits. Same thing happened with GMA. We got one of our clients into Good Morning America, and they had a like 30 seconds, which is a lot, on air broadcast spot. Did not garner them sales because most people who are watching Good Morning America early in the morning are not off to go buy something. They're either at work, wasting time, or they're just watching the show to get their news updates or kind of find out about trends. They're not necessarily going to take action on a payment or to buy a product right then. So that's something to remember. Where does your key audience read their news? Pick outlets based on that. Journalists are great once you know what outlet that you want to approach. Each outlet has a variety of journalists that might cover similar topics. So something to note is that make sure that you look at that journalist's recent articles so that you know that that person is the right person. Sometimes on staff, editorial staff, they just get assigned stuff and they don't actually have a particular beat. And then some people will have a particular beat. So there is usually a reviews reporter. There's usually a startup tech reporter. There's usually a Hong Kong reporter. There's sometimes even a regional area reporter. So remember that there's so many different titles. Make sure you're looking at the right person. Twitter and LinkedIn are great places to find out exactly what they cover and kind of where their interests lie. Also, it'll help you get some personal information about them so that maybe you can say, hey, guess what? We went to the same college, or I saw that you recently went to Italy, and what was your favorite thing? Connect with them on that kind of level. So that's kind of the research portion. Find the right story. Best practices is to really identify a subject line that's going to get someone to open an email. Email is really right now the main mode of information sharing when we're doing pitching and reporting. DMs sometimes work, not always. Some people get annoyed with that. Just be careful. And make sure that your email is short, sweet, and has a call to action. So short, sweet, has a call to action, but also shares the impact of why you're reaching out to that person. Another thing to note is time zones. When you're sending emails, be wary of the time zone that you're sending emails in. Not everybody lives in Pacific time, I've noticed. So there's Eastern time, Pacific time, there's Asia time, there's European UK time. Make sure you're sending it in their time zone. Muckrack is a tool that we use, similar to Cision. It's a kind of PR database. And what we've noticed in there is that the trend is that most reporters or journalists read and go back to their emails between 9 and 11 a.m. their time zone. So that's when they like to receive pitches. And so that's when they're more receptive to receiving pitches, 9 to 11. Now, if you have a relationship, you can manipulate that time zone, right? If you have a relationship with someone, you can send it at a certain time and they'll look at it. But if you don't have that relationship, try to send it in that window. I think right now I'm seeing that's the most common window that people are receiving and looking at pitches. The other thing is don't be afraid to follow up. But when you do follow up with value added content. Don't just say, hey, I sent you an email. Did you see it? I sent you an email. Here's some additional statistics that supports what I was saying before. Or, hey, this is my calendar link. Can we talk for 15 minutes? Have some kind of new information in every email exchange that you have. Don't be afraid to try to meet up with them in person, grab a coffee, get a breakfast, especially if you're heading to a trade show. Everybody has to eat. What do we fail to do when we go to events? We don't have time to eat, or we need coffee. Well, I need coffee, or we need to hydrate, or we need to sit down, or we need to charge our devices. Remember, tap into these real human needs to kind of get what you are looking for. And that way you guys can serve their need, they can serve your need for getting noticed. Following up is key and an integral part, not only just following up to emails, but also following up once you've had a conversation. Make sure that you follow up with assets, high resolution images, any other kind of assets that reporter can use. You really want to make sure that you're providing the most value possible, becoming a resource for that journalist. The last thing I could say about best practice is in media and managing the media is really just, look, I don't read the news every day. And what I do is really focus on the topic areas that I'm most interested in pitching. Because if you read too much, I think you cast your net a little bit too wide. You really have to be more specific to capture attention. So make sure that you're doing the right kinds of research and spending your time in the right spot when you are trying to manage media relations for your brand, or you're trying to expand your brand visibility. Make sure that you are leveraging tools and ideas that are going to reach your key stakeholders, not just ideas that you come up with because you think they're good ones. So that's a lot of what we do, is manage expectations that way. Also, remember that if people are not responding, it could just be a timing issue. Maybe it's not that they're not interested, but it's just a timing issue of, it's not the right time. They're working on something else. There's just a lot going on all the time nowadays. And so it's just really important to keep these things in mind, to keep yourself sane. And there's a lot of opportunities out there. So if you're not getting one opportunity, bang down a different door. There's a lot of ways to get noticed. And a lot of resources. So feel free again to email me, Ronjini at thesilvertelegram.com. I'm more than happy to provide some insights. If you have a pitch, if you have a headline, I'm happy to help you kind of fine tune it and get that in there. Oh, okay. We have another question I'll answer. What's the best timeline for follow-ups? For example, is it 1 to 2 days, a few weeks? This is a great question. So I kind of go by the practice of 1 to 2 days. And I follow up at least 3 times, if not 4 times. I used to say follow up until they tell you to stop. But who has that kind of time anymore? I don't have time to waste on one person if I need to get to a new contact. So I typically do 3 follow-ups, 1 to 2 days apart. Few weeks that actually would be a good way to do a quick reminder if you wanted to, if you knew that person was like really the right person. I would put a reminder in your calendar to boomerang that email back to you in maybe a month and say, hey, I reached out to you last month about this topic. I still think it's very relevant. Here's some new information. Is now a better time to connect with you? So yes, absolutely. If you know that that person is the right person, because sometimes you just know, you're like, this is the right person, but they're not getting back to me because they're out of the office or they have something else to do, whatever the case may be. So for your immediate pitches, 1 to 2 days apart, 3 times. For that person who's just the right target who isn't responding, follow up into 3 to 4 weeks. Yes, absolutely boomerang that email. Another question is, what about follow-ups when sending out a press blast versus personalized pitching? Great question. So press releases are another dynamic that I didn't really talk about in this conversation. But you need to pitch a press release before it goes out. That's just the nature of press releases. Once a press release is out, it's out. So I would say if you have a finalized press release, start pitching it 3 to 4 days before the press release goes out. If you could do a week, great. I never see anyone have that kind of time, but a week before would be ideal. Pre-pitch it. That's called pre-pitching. You're going to pre-pitch it, get some interest. Usually there's about 3 or 4 people that will weigh in if you have a good list, and say, yes, I'd like to see your press release in advance. Okay. Then you also send out the press release. This is so key. I send it out 30 minutes before it hits the wire. I know it's like my little weird hack, but I send it out 30 minutes before it hits the wire. I know it's usually very, very early in the morning, like 6 o'clock Pacific time for most of our press releases. I can schedule that through some kind of connection in Gmail, or my email program. So I'll schedule that, or I'll just plan to be up to send those emails that early. So I do it 30 minutes before it hits the wire. Hey, this is coming out at this time. And then I do another follow-up the next morning. This press release came out yesterday. Wanted to follow up to see if you can cover it. So those are the 3 kind of categories of outreach for press release. So a week before, day of, and the day after. And hopefully you're like having communications and like different interactions in that time frame. And then by the end of that week of when you do the press release, it's pretty much over. It's over. That's basically how much time you have to get coverage on a press release, unless there's some kind of other big thing tied to it. That's usually the lifespan. It's about 2 weeks. It's a 2-week lifespan where you have to really get the attention that you want. Unless it's a product where you're going to get product reviews, it's a consumer tech product, then you have a little bit longer because people are going to review the product, and that's a whole different program. So, and then the personalized pitching, I would do a month. I would give a month for that personalized pitching, and really kind of dedicate some time and effort into kind of building that flow that I talked about earlier. 1 to 2 days for three follow-ups, and then kind of revisiting it in a month later, or revisiting it a couple months later. And again, it depends on how certain you are that that journalist is the right person. So I hope that answers your question. I think that answers both of these questions. So, any more questions that you guys have? I think those are really good tent poles to kind of follow up on. All right. I hope you guys have gleaned a lot of information. I feel like I've said a lot of really cool little points here, and we'll send this recording out to everyone who registered, so you guys will get that. I'm also going to send some pitching resources. So AP best practices, the outline of a pitch. We have some worksheets that you guys can see. So I'll follow up with those in addition to some of our resources. Again, the PR Playbook podcast is a great resource. It has a lot of the DIY tips that I talked about today. DIY PR letter. Please subscribe and share with anybody that you know that would feel like they get value from it. And then our blog has a lot of great content that is really in depth. And then, of course, reach out to me if you guys have any questions. I hope you found this useful. I think I've answered so many questions, and I look forward to the next webinar. If you guys have any ideas, shoot them over to me, and I'm happy to do a webinar on that next. Have a great week, and happy summer, everyone. Good luck.